What is going on, everyone? This is Miles with Windows Central Gaming, and welcome to the 23rd episode of Xbox Chaturdays. Today, I'm stoked to be joined by gaming industry analyst Benji-Sales to talk about a lot of great topics today. We had the Xbox Q3 earnings. We're going to be talking about the highly debated $70 price point in video games. We're going to be talking a little bit about what we've seen from Halo Infinite, and we're going to be talking about Project Dragon, which we kind of broke earlier this week, yesterday. But before we get into all of that, Benji, for the people who don't know who you are, can you give people a quick breakdown of who you are, where they can find you, and what you love about gaming?
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on today. I'm really excited. We got some great topics to talk about. I'm Benji-Sales. I'm an independent video game industry analyst, just a guy doing the best I can on my own to cover the video game industry. Kind of specialize, of course, in the business, sales, financial, data side of the industry. But, I like talking about video games overall in general. But definitely the thing I've carved out for myself, especially, is covering that business and sales side of the industry.
The numbers, which I'm stoked to have you on. Like when I first scheduled you on, I wasn't even thinking about this Q3 earnings. So the fact that this lined up really well is just going to be beautiful. I'm excited to pick your brain on some of those juicy numbers that we got earlier this week.
Yeah, perfect timing. Couldn't have worked out better.
So first topic, I guess we're going to jump straight into is probably arguably the biggest one this week. And that involves kind of our reporting on IO Interactive's kind of new IP, Project Dragon, as it's been codenamed. So earlier this week, I guess, yes, I keep saying earlier this week. It was yesterday. It was yesterday. It was yesterday. We put out a video basically talking about, we had teased the Dragon, we had teased the Cyclone, we had some information regarding basically what Xbox was working on when it comes to these third-party partnerships. And, we have some good information, and we sprinkled out some more of that information that we have about what this could potentially be, and that Microsoft could be the ones to potentially publish this. So what are your thoughts on this? I know you're kind of up to speed on this. What was your initial impression when you heard that IO was going to be making a basically fantasy game with dragons?
That is the part that especially caught me off guard. There had been like a little bit of rumblings kind of floating out there that maybe IO and Microsoft were doing a little bit of talking. But the fact it is a fantasy dragon RPG, that is not where my mind would have went for IO Interactive, which is really exciting, right? To see them tackle something potentially completely different than what we're accustomed to from that studio. But yeah, that is, if you would have given me like a list of things, that would have not been the one I would have picked coming from them. So that is really exciting. It's really cool. I think it shows, how important exclusive content is getting, and how, Microsoft and Sony and others are really heavily courting third parties to try to lock up that exclusive content as well, to kind of also help that first party output. It's showing a trend in the industry at the moment.
Absolutely. And we can draw a lot of parallels between that and, as we've seen with video streaming services. We are in a war of exclusives, but it's not in terms of hardware like console exclusive anymore. We are in a war of platform exclusives, and Microsoft kind of understands that, and that's why they're obviously investing in first party and leveraging third party to make sure that with Xbox Game Pass as the biggest focus for Xbox right now, that they have a constant stream of stuff that makes you say, I need Game Pass. Game Pass is rad. I need to keep my subscription going. So their cadence ultimately is going to be every single month there's going to be at least one title of note that you can say, I want to play this. And long term, that is their goal. And these kind of third party partnerships, obviously, we're not going to get a massive AAA third party game in Xbox Game Pass every single month. But, every couple months, if they can sprinkle in something like this, that is going to be a huge boon to the service.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like it's huge. And I'll tell you, it does line up with some of the thought behind it. Apparently this is like an online type experience, like a connected world type thing. And we have seen that those sorts of games do particularly well in Game Pass. Don't get me wrong, like the single player stuff does as well. That's also a huge boost to the service. But like what we just saw with Outriders, where you saw some crazy metrics for that game thanks to Game Pass. Yeah, clearly these sorts of online experiences especially are really, really strong there. If you look at like the most played games on Game Pass or the most downloaded, there is a lot of single player stuff there too, but there's also a lot of this like, online type stuff. So, I mean, it works out. It makes perfect sense. And I think it's a really exciting, very exciting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When I was on Game On Daily Live a few weeks ago, I was, talking about what we were willing to discuss regarding it. And I basically said that, one of these projects was from a developer in a genre that you would not expect. I was in the same boat when I saw this information regarding IO Interactive and the project they're working on. I was like, wow. You look at their track record of the games they've made, and they have not made anything close to this style at all. So it's cool, it's exciting because IO makes incredible games. Hitman 3 is a testament to their skill and their technical abilities. So yeah, if they are passionate about this and they have the means and resources to do it, I want to see, somebody give them a big sack of money to make a big epic dragon game. Let's go.
Yeah, like it makes sense from their perspective too, right? We've kind of been looking at it from Microsoft's point of view. It gets something into Game Pass, it gets them an exclusive, game, but also it makes a lot of sense if you're IO Interactive, right? Making something that's a totally different genre than what you're accustomed to, making a new IP. This sort of thing is always going to be really risky. So getting that sort of backing and commitment from a major publishing partner like Microsoft, it also makes perfect sense for them too. So, I mean, I think it's a deal that works great for both sides.
Oh, absolutely. That's what, I always joke about drinking the Game Pass Kool-Aid on this show, and it's just kind of become a meme at this point. But I always, care about the developers and think about the developers when I'm looking at like the business side of this and why Game Pass is cool. And Game Pass alleviates a lot of the stress of like making a new IP. You look at Kingdoms of Amalur as an example of a team that was trying to make this big, ambitious RPG. They put all this time and resources and effort into it, and it sold well. Like it sold, I think, 3 million copies within the first year. So it was not necessarily, a poorly selling game or a poorly received game. But at the same time, they were bankrupt. They were completely destroyed from one single game. And that kind of stuff has got to be scary as a team when you want to make something big, you want to make something ambitious, but you have the legitimate risk of just going under if it does not explode. And that's got to be terrifying. And so that's why I like Game Pass for the developers in that sense, that they have this safety net. So no matter what happens at the end of the day, if it doesn't sell 10, 20 million copies, whatever the wild metric they have set is, they're not going under and they're not laying a bunch of people off, which is always just terrible to see. All these people spend years and years of their lives pouring energy and effort and love and care into a game, and then having it come out with a thud. And it's just,
new IP is very risky. There's a reason you see so many sequels, right? Like don't get me wrong, we see new IPs all the time as well, but there's a reason you see those franchises that just keep going and keep going. Brand recognition is a very big thing. And you definitely need new IP. Like they're very important, but it is very risky. It is so risky.
It's scary. It's super scary, and that's something that a lot of people casually invested in gaming don't really, I think, consider as much. As like they want new IPs. Everybody wants new IPs. Everybody wants those new experiences. But when you look at the business side of things and what goes into that, it's a roll of the dice. It's a big gamble to invest in that. So. Yeah, I feel for them. And again, I don't want to drink the Game Pass Kool-Aid, but I think ultimately long-term that alleviates some of that pressure.
For sure.
Just want to give a quick shout out to the 140 people hanging with us already. Really appreciate it. See some awesome people in the chat. Paris, Samuel Tolbert, Mr. Joanna Dark. Who else we got? We got a squad rolling deep already.
No kidding. This is like an all-star lineup we got going on.
Appreciate y'all joining us on this fine Saturday. Stoked to dive into it. Again, we do have a lot of really legitimately great topics to cover today. But yeah, so this IO Xbox partnership is super exciting, and it shows the investment from Xbox when it comes to bolstering their exclusive library. We've teased the Cyclone, which is separate from this. So I can say, because I've had some people kind of ask me like, you were teasing this big multiplayer thing, and you were teasing this thing, and the the dragon and cyclone thing are completely separate. The cyclone thing, I'll say specifically, when I was on Game On Daily Live, because a lot of people were kind of quoting that was the multiplayer kind of centric, focused, unique multiplayer experience thing. The dragon thing is the tease that I was talking about when I said a genre from a developer you wouldn't expect. So just for clarification there, because I've had a lot of people messaging me about that. So those are the two separate teases there. And then I'll let you do with that what you will. But yeah, a lot of that stuff is a ways out. So Project Dragon, first off, it's not Scalebound. It's definitely not Scalebound.
Yeah, I've seen some people guess that's like, no. No.
The YouTube video when that went up, so many people were like, is this Scalebound? Is this going to be a spiritual successor or a reboot to Scalebound? No. It's time to let Scalebound rest.
Let it go.
It's one of those things where publicly Platinum and Xbox haven't really said much about this whole experience, but what is the director? I forget the direct. Basically, the game director of Scalebound said, "Ask Microsoft about Scalebound." Somewhat recently, and so that has stirred up a lot of the speculation about like, oh, maybe there's a potential for this to come back, but ultimately, I think Xbox has no interest in touching Scalebound ever again, because some of the things I've heard internally is that
it's not good.
They were kind of burned on this whole deal. Like Platinum overcommitted to what they could do. They were doing a bunch of projects simultaneously, and that ultimately led to them having to basically scrap Scalebound because they had to basically go to Xbox and say, hey, we need X more money and X more time to make this game. And they were like, no, like that's not going to work for us. And so scrapped it. So ultimately, I don't think Xbox has any interest in revisiting Scalebound. So I don't think Scalebound is in the talks as a possibility at all right now. So not to be the bearer of bad news, but I think Scalebound, RIP, pour one out. Let's move past it. And it's funny because there's kind of this like these rose tinted glasses when we look at Scalebound. I was excited for Scalebound when it was first revealed, but a lot of people were dumping on Scalebound. Like the Scalebound reveal was panned pretty hard by a lot of people. So it's kind of funny now that retroactively there's this kind of like resurgence of people like Scalebound when it was kind of met with middling reception.
I think it's one of those things like people want that dragon fantasy RPG, right? They want it. Like there has been multiple attempts at it. We had Lair back in the day. We had the Scalebound attempt. There just has not been many games that have actually been able to deliver on that, right? Like Game of Thrones, of course, it was big for a ton of reasons, but what did you always see? You saw people posting the dragons, right? There's just something about it people love. So I think that's part of why people are a little nostalgic and want to see Scalebound, and also why I think you're seeing so much interest around this Project Dragon. It's just something that clicks with a lot of people that we just don't have many games like that, right? So this could be very big, especially with as talented as IO Interactive is. This could be a big deal. This could definitely be a big deal, but it's probably quite a ways away, I would think.
Yeah, people were asking, like, are we going to see a tease at E3 this year? I don't think so at all. I don't even think we'll see it. Maybe next year, potentially next year, but I think it could be even like 2 years out before we even get the official reveal. Because as I talked about in the video, this is super, super early prototyping. Like this is like a document with an idea of basically what the game is at this point, and like people kind of brainstorming what the project could be. So yeah, people are asking like, oh, what's the gameplay going to be? And what's this? And, there's some details on what it could be, but I think we're realistically too early outside of like the general concept of they want to make this fantasy game with dragons. And that's basically the only thing ultimately that I think will pan out in terms of like the long-term tale of what this project ends up being, because this as I talked about in the video, the stuff gets retooled. Kingdoms of Amalur was another great example of this epic ambitious game that was supposed to be like an MMO. It was supposed to be like hundreds of players and all this big stuff and these huge ideas, and then it ultimately ended up being like a single player experience. So again, that's kind of an example of a prototyping phase that got completely retooled and shifted to a more scaled down project. So yeah, I'm not going to comment on, what I think the gameplay is going to be or anything like that, because it could change. But I'm still excited because those guys make some phenomenal games, and I'm excited to see what they can do with that setting. Because
Yeah, for sure.
as much as I love Hitman, I dig the fantasy setting.
Yeah,
I love
I'm with
throwing bananas at people's faces and being ridiculous in Hitman, but yeah, give me some dragons. Let's go.
I'll tell you what, one other quick thing on it. It's good to see IO Interactive like finding their foot and having some success, because there was a few years back there where things were looking a little shaky for them, right? There was Hitman was kind of stalling out. It felt like before Hitman 3, right? Hitman 3 was a big success, but before that it kind of felt like it was stalling. You had them kind of going independent, and there was a lot of questions around that, like, are they going to be able to be successful in this space? Then you see Hitman 3 just be a huge success for them. Like, it did phenomenal for them. Then you have, the James Bond announcement, and now you have this Project Dragon. So I'm always going to be happy to see an independent team doing really well and finding success, because that's hard to pull off. So yeah, happy for them. Very happy for them.
Again, yeah, going independent is another big risk. So it is exciting to see them getting these projects lined up. And when I heard about 007, that made sense. I could see IO Interactive doing 007. It fits in with that kind of Hitman formula, the gadgets, the stealth elements. That totally makes sense. When I heard IO was working on a fantasy game with dragons, I was like, okay, let's see how this plays out. Like, this is not something I can envision as, like, I understand what this could look like or what this could be. Really, I don't have any idea of what this could look like or what this could be, if I'm being honest. So I'm excited about that kind of. That's the stuff that gets me excited about the industry, is the kind of wild possibilities, the wild what ifs. What if this team did this? Years ago, if you said, IO is going to make a fantasy RPG with dragons, I would have said, what? No way. No way. Stop it. That's absurd. You're being absurd. Stop it. But now we're in a world where that is a reality, and it's pretty exciting.
There's a lot of funding going around right now. So potentially a lot of exciting projects, because there's a lot of money that's going around. So we could see some very exciting stuff from studios.
Yes, and I think, a lot more studios that are independent are going to be looking at those kind of big budget, like third-party exclusives, because we know Microsoft and we know PlayStation are willing to pay money for those. So that,
Sony,
again,
look at Returnal, right? That was a brand new IP funded by them for a third-party studio. So it's really like an industry-wide phenomenon that's happening right now.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's some exciting times. So I'm going to get to a super chat from Poochie here. Very excited to hear that IOI is working on an RPG project. Miles, I have a question regarding Hellblade 2. Any timetable on when we'll see this? I'm really hoping we see some bit of gameplay at E3 this year. I don't know for sure. I'm not going to say 100%. We got that little tease of them basically like showcasing the telemetry kind of recently at the game, or that was the game showcase last year when everybody's like, yeah, we're going to see some Hellblade trailer. We're going to see some Hellblade gameplay. And they came on and said, hey, we're working on Hellblade 2. Here's some pictures of some mountains. And yeah, we'll show more later. And everybody's like, oh,
that what people expected.
The telemetry tech is awesome. And we've got confirmation that State of Decay 3 is using that. Hellblade 2 is going to be using that. So when that starts rolling out into games, that is going to be so incredible for environments. But yeah, I want to see some gameplay. I want to see Hellblade 2 in action, because that will be the first Unreal 5 title that I think Xbox is going to showcase. And I'm hoping we're at a point where we can showcase that now. Hellblade 2 definitely is not dropping this year. But I'm hoping for fall of next year is what they're targeting for Hellblade 2. So I'm hoping to see a little splat, even just a gameplay tease of some kind of E3 this year is kind of my hope and my expectation.
Yeah, that game made like so much buzz with that first trailer. Like crazy, right? People were going nuts because it was like basically the first next gen thing we saw at the time, right? So people were going crazy, and I'm with you. Hopefully they show it this coming E3, because I feel like that's a game that can really get people excited.
I'm not exaggerating at all when I say that is the trailer I've watched more times than any trailer ever. It's so well produced, like just the excitement, the energy surrounding it, the weird vibe of everything. I don't know what it was. It just captivated me. The first time I watched it, I got chills. It's one of those times just like, oh, this is going to be
Mhm.
something special. And then, no
And
joke,
it's
watch
still
it
more
10.
oh, sorry.
I said, no joke, watch it like 10 or 15 times after that. I was just like, oof, oh, give me
Yeah.
this.
It's still one of the most impressive things I've seen. So hopefully the final game, can be close to that. But you go back and you watch that trailer now, it's been, what, over a year since that trailer. You look at it and it still looks insane. So hopefully, I mean, if it looks anything close to that, that is going to be incredible.
Yeah, it's going to be a real treat. And yeah, so that is when I'm expecting to see it. I hope we get something at E3 this year for that. I imagine we will get something. I just don't know if it's going to be an extended gameplay breakdown or if it's going to be another kind of cinematic focused trailer. But I don't imagine we go this E3 without seeing something from Hellblade. But I wouldn't expect to play Hellblade this year for sure. All right, next topic we're going to dive into is some juicy Xbox financials. And I'm excited to have you here for this segment because we got the Q3 earnings from Microsoft. And you were in the trenches watching the entire thing. And sadly, we only got a brief little snippet for gaming revenue, which was kind of disappointing. So I wanted to pick your brain on a few things. First off, they mentioned that Xbox hardware was up to like 232% year over year, which is huge. And then in that same breath, they basically said, this is with chip shortages. Stock does not even come close to meeting demand.
No. Yeah, not even close.
So,
Not even close.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So that number, first of all, is incredibly impressive. You're going to see some people get upset that they didn't mention units, right? That they're still only talking revenue. Trust me, I'm one of those people. I wish I could see every single unit figure that there is, okay? You're talking to a guy that wants as much data as possible. But at the same time, you also have to keep in mind that Microsoft looks at their business now as more than just how many units of anything that we sell, right? It's not just about how many units of a game. It's not just about how many units of a console. Revenue actually is more important to them, and total players is more important. So, I had somebody ask about this in one of my chats. They were like, where's the hardware figures? Like, where's the number? Because as we know, Sony does put that out there, and so does Nintendo. And I said, honestly, even if Series X and S goes on to be an enormous success in terms of units, right? If it goes on to be 100 million selling, console, I don't think you're ever going to see Microsoft again come out and every quarter give you, the sales numbers for the Series X and S. Yeah, I'm sure they'll give you some milestones if it's coming out there and doing incredible, but more often than not, just expect you're going to get these kinds of figures, right? This revenue growth, that kind of thing over like, hey, we sold 3 point whatever million units this quarter. I don't think you'll see them really do that.
Yeah, and that kind of makes sense with their engagement and their monthly active users and those sort of metrics that they're shifting the Xbox kind of platform to. We even had Shuhei Yoshida basically come out and say the same thing recently, is that those are the kind of metrics that they're using to determine the success of their gaming platforms. So yeah, a shift to focus on percentages and stuff like that, which, isn't exciting. We have people in the community who want to flex those big numbers. We have a lot of people, with PlayStation, they're loud and proud about the number of units they sell. So they're always touting that 4 million, 5 million. Every time there's a million milestone, they're out there shouting it, yelling it. And then some people interpret that as, the Xbox must not be selling well if they're not promoting those numbers. But but to that end, I really want to pick your brain on an area where Microsoft is doing incredibly well, and they're still not giving us numbers, which is Xbox Game Pass. You, I'm sure, and myself, we wanted that confirmation. We wanted the Xbox Game Pass confirmation because we know roughly what it is. We know it's over 22 million right now. We know that. They didn't say that. They didn't say we're over 22 million. We've gained, almost 5 million subs in a couple months. They didn't say that, which was, to me, really strange.
Yeah, I was shocked by that. So I listened through, the whole investor call, the whole thing. I'm sitting there waiting. I'm hearing about all kinds of stuff. I'll be frank, I'm not that interested in. There's some parts of Microsoft's business outside of gaming, I do keep tabs on basically all this stuff in some degree, but I'm not exactly thrilled at listening to how much Teams is doing or something like that, right? I'm more here for the video game stuff. So I'm sitting here through this whole call. I'm waiting. Come on, here comes those numbers. we never got Game Pass subs. And that does surprise me because, as you said, we basically know where it is, right? It's well over 20 million. And we also know that it's hugely successful. Okay. So if you look at Game Pass, that service started June 2017, I believe, was the launch of Game Pass.
Mm-hmm.
It took them until 2019 to hit 10 million subs. They announced that in, I believe, April 2019. So you're looking at basically almost 2 years to get to that, 10 million sub number. And now we know, that that's actually increasing, right? Because from 2019 to basically the end of 2020, so you're looking at like a year and a half, they were close to 20 million. They were at like 18 million they announced in January. And now it's gone up even faster than that in the first 3 months of the year. So their subscription growth is excellent. I figured that'd be something you want to shout from the rooftops.
Mm-hmm.
Like, look at this growth. I mean, investors love growth, right? It doesn't matter what it is. The investors see the numbers going up and they love it. So I thought for sure they would give that shout out. But I don't know. Maybe they were so focused on other parts of the business that they just didn't really feel like it needed to be mentioned. As I said, I listened to this whole investors call. There was not a single question about the gaming division from a single investor. Not even one was put out there about anything, not about the Series X, not about, which is pretty normal, right? I don't think people should take that as a bad thing. It's pretty normal that a lot of these investing calls, they don't talk about gaming that much. It just still surprises me with how much that business is growing for Microsoft. 50% growth in revenue, right? For the overall business. That's still, you don't hear more drumming up from investors. Like, give us more. What's going on here? So it was a bummer. I'm shocked that number's not out there, but maybe they're waiting for a certain milestone. Maybe they're waiting for 25 million or something like that.
I could definitely see that with the amount of growth that they've had. Because, I mean, they have to know it's doing well. And it is really strange that they would have this investors call. And with Game Pass being the focus for the Xbox division, that is the number one metric for success that they are using right now is the growth of Game Pass. It is really strange that they didn't even mention a number like that, especially when they have good numbers to show. So yeah, it could just be that they are waiting for that 25 million. It just looks nicer to get that out in the world. 25 million, just nice round number, which they'll probably hit pretty shortly.
Soon, yeah, I would think.
We're at a rate of over 1 million new subs a month right now, and that seems to be increasing as we've seen. So it's going to be really fascinating to see what the end of this year looks like, especially with Halo Infinite on the horizon, potentially Starfield on the horizon, and a bunch of other third-party day and date games I'm sure are coming to the service before the end of the year. It'll be really interesting to see what they finish the year at. And I guess while we're on this topic, I'll pick your brain. What do you think Microsoft's goal is? I think they will easily blow past 30 million by the end of this year. But with how aggressive they've been this year, do you think they are shooting for an astronomical number by the end of 2021?
So I lean, like just me, I lean more towards the kind of number you're putting out there, right? Like that 30 million range, because even though right now they're at a pace that looks like they can probably go higher than that, right? It looks like that's in play. You do want to also caution, though, that like you can't always assume that every single month is going to grow like what we've been seeing the last few months. But maybe it can go bigger, right? But usually, oftentimes in business, you want to kind of forecast conservative instead of going above and beyond. Because here's the thing. If you blow past expectations, it looks great. But if you set your bar too high and you miss, suddenly it looks terrible, right?
Yeah.
So
puts people investors on edge. Like, oh, whoa, what's going on here?
For me, if I was them, right, and this is just me speaking as some guy, right, they've got people running the numbers over there that are, they know way more than me. But from my perspective, if this number we're hearing is accurate, which there's lots of evidence, yeah, it should be 22 to 23 million, somewhere in that range. If I was them, I would be looking at 30 million, right? That would be my goal. Anything over that is gravy. But it has potential to be much higher, right? Especially, I would say, if things like Forza Horizon 5 is really hitting this year, if, Halo Infinite comes out and is high quality. I know some people wonder how much Halo Infinite will actually boost Game Pass because multiplayer is free to play, right? So you don't even need Game Pass to play that multiplayer portion. However, I think a lot of people are going to want to dive into that campaign as well, play co-op with their friends, things like that. So Halo has potential to elevate that, but I would say at least 30 million. I would say if they're at 22 and 23 million right now and they can't get over 30 million, I would consider that a little bit of a disappointment, just because we still have we're only in May. We still have a good chunk of the year left to increase that sub count. But I think they're going to be looking for 50 million rapidly after that. Probably by the end of 2022, I would think they can be in that 50 million range.
Yeah, I think that's a good
Close
place to
to
be.
it, at least.
And yeah, like you said, there's no guarantee that the growth we're seeing now is going to be consistent. But if they keep pushing these huge third-party partnerships like MLB the Show, stuff, games like that, that appeal to a broad audience, because we're invested in the people like us invest in the gaming industry. We look at the core games, we look at the games that we love and have a lot of tail and have some meat to them. But Xbox is kind of looking outside of that web, and obviously they're catering to that, but they also want to pull in as many people as possible, and that's why we've seen such this push into sports games. They're trying to leverage Xbox Game Pass as the best value to play sports games, which is, there are people who only buy sports games every year, and that is their investment into gaming. And Xbox says, hey, we're going to cater to that. We're going to pull them into Game Pass. We're going to get them on this sub. And then they're going to realize, oh, I have this sub already. I can play this, this, and this. And they're going to play these games, buy the microtransactions, etc., and kind of pull in additional revenue there. So it's a really smart play to focus on the casual audience there, without obviously ignoring the core fandom that they built up over the years.
Yeah. And I think the most impressive thing there about the subscription growth, and I kind of mentioned this on Twitter, that's without first party really heavily hitting right now, right? It's really that Game Pass growth off of games from first party that have already been out for a while, right? Just because they haven't had a ton of new releases lately, and third party, right? That's really what's bolstering the service right now. Just imagine when you start seeing these 23 studios start to truly deliver, because I'll tell you what, if you go into the most played section on Game Pass, oftentimes half the games roughly are first party studio games. And like I said, that's without major new releases. So clearly, even though third party is a big driver of Game Pass, clearly first party is also a very large push of Game Pass. So once you start getting that consistency, like we were saying, every other month, every 2 months or so, you're getting a Microsoft game in there. I mean, that's going to exponentially grow, in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, they have a lot of reasons to be very confident in their direction with Game Pass. That's for darn sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. I want to give a quick shout out to the 220 people hanging with us.
Wow, 220. That is awesome.
Stoked. If you guys are digging the show, hit that like button, share it out. Let's see how many folks we can get in here. But yeah, you bring up some excellent points about kind of the fact that Xbox hasn't really had any, what I would argue, must plays really first party wise since Game Pass has launched. I'm in the camp that Sea of Thieves is one of the most important new IP of the last decade, but it's hard for me to argue that everyone has to play Sea of Thieves. I love it. I understand that. It's a great game. There's a lot of aspects that I love, but yeah, arguably there hasn't been a ton of, you have to play this first party Xbox game in Game Pass. And despite that, they've seen incredible growth. So, let's say Halo Infinite comes out of the gate, and that is what they set out Xbox Game Studios to be, and that is the showcase of the future of Xbox Game Studios, which I've talked about in the past. I think that is their goal. I think that's honestly what they have to do with Halo Infinite. Every game moving forward under the Xbox Game Studios banner should be, and really needs to be, the best the series has ever seen. And I think that is their goal with Halo Infinite. If Halo Infinite can come out and be the best Halo that's ever made, that is going to set the precedent that, Xbox Game Pass is not your AA, your quote unquote filler stuff, which was the argument for a while, that Xbox Game Pass is not only the best value, but we are going to give you the best games. And if they can deliver on that, if they can have the best value and deliver the best games, that is, the word of mouth on that is going to be incredible. And if Halo Infinite can be a game that nobody can ignore, which we always look at PlayStation titles like God of War, Ghost of Tsushima, all these kind of like conversation dominating games, because they are great. They put a lot of time, energy, and love into making sure that these games are great, and people play them, have to talk about them. And once Xbox gets to a point where they have games on that caliber, the games that people can't ignore, the games that everyone talks about, it's going to be really hard to like not have Game Pass. Like realistically, like what is going to be the counter to not having Game Pass if you have a PC or you have an Xbox, or if you're a casual and you have a phone? Like if you can just hit up your friend and say, "Hey, you picking up the new Halo?" And he's like, "I don't know, man. I don't want to pay for it." And he's like, "I don't have an Xbox, whatever it is." And he's like, "Oh yeah, just $15 and you can play Halo on your phone." He's like, "Oh, okay. $15 you can play Halo on your browser." Like stuff like that is going to be really big for increasing player count and then increasing the overall appeal of Game Pass to a broad audience.
Yep. I agree with every single one of those points. And then also the other big metric on there is consistency, right? Consistent, rapid output. You know, I kind of, one comparison you can say to like, you know, Netflix or Disney Plus or things like this. And I know some people get annoyed constantly comparing Game Pass to like, you know, television or movie streaming services. But believe it or not, there is a lot of overlap in terms of how you structure the business, right? There are differences, of course. Things like Netflix, you don't have that purchase option. You don't have that DLC and microtransaction option that also funnels more money into it. But in terms of like just subscription growth, you know, one thing that makes Netflix just such a must-have for so many people, right? Is that constant drip of new content. Netflix has a new movie, a new series, I mean, every single week. And I think it's a little unrealistic to be expecting Microsoft to give you a new game every single week. But every single month, I think that is an expectation you can have. Again, like you were saying, I don't know that you could expect a new Halo Infinite caliber game every single month. That might be a little extreme.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but some sort of game. Because while there has been some great games that have launched into Game Pass, like, you know, Gears 5, for example, you have like these large chunks in time, right? You have a game hit the Game Pass service from first party. I'm just speaking first party. Then you have maybe like, you know, 4 or 5 months until you get another one in there. The key to get up to those crazy high numbers where you just have to have it, you know, that service, you're constantly getting a big new game. And that's going to be the other thing. They got to get that quality and they got to get that consistency, which 23 studios, some of those multi-team, help you accomplish.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah, we have 23 studios. Most of these have 2 teams. Some of them have more. So yeah, they can realistically, we'll need to give them honestly a year, 2 years, but we could get to a point where there is a first party Xbox game studio every month or every other month. Like ultimately, I think that is their vision plan. And especially, you know, when they start leveraging these third party kind of partnerships to fill those gaps. I'm sure they want something every single month. And, you know, the third party stuff is going to fill that. And they've also done a really good job getting some exciting, cool indies in there as well that have also been able to fill those gaps. So it's not only about blockbuster big bangers. It's also about like looking at cool indie projects that are in the works and saying, hey, how do we get this in? Like, this is a project, this is cool. Maybe not tens of millions of people are going to be excited about it, but there's a core audience that is going to be stoked about this. How do we get that in day one? And so, yeah, the partnership team has done an excellent job reaching out to those teams and saying, hey, here's what we can offer you with Game Pass. We would love to have your game in here. Here are all the metrics. And what's most fascinating to me is despite some of the rhetoric we see online with people saying it's not sustainable, it's bad for the developers, whatever, there is no evidence of that whatsoever. In fact, we only have evidence to the contrary. We've seen the Dirt 5 dev. So many different devs have come forward and said, we were blown away by the number of people who played and bought our game when we launched in Game Pass. The Medium, they made their entire budget back in a day. 24 hours, they made their entire marketing and development budget back in a day from sales. This game launched into Xbox Game Pass. They weren't factoring in what they got from the Xbox Game Pass deal. They're saying what they sold on day one covered the cost of development and marketing, which is wild. And you have the word of mouth. You have people who say like, hey, I picked up the Medium, or I'm playing the Medium on Game Pass. Like, oh, that looks awesome. And so even if you don't have Game Pass, you're like, so your friend tells you how awesome it is, maybe you buy it. And that's kind of the benefit of launching games into that service.
Absolutely. So first of all, of course, if you're on Game Pass, you're going to get some sort of monetary benefit from Microsoft, right? Whether that's a huge upfront, payday, whether that's some money, and then if you hit milestones, you could get more money. However you structure that deal, because there are different ways of structuring it from what I understand. No matter what, you're getting something right off the bat. And then like you mentioned, the other added benefit, and I talk about this sometimes when people say, how can a game being on Game Pass help its sales whenever you're giving, quote, quote, free access to so many people?
Mm-hmm.
The answer to that is just really simple. You're talking instant marketing to now over 20 million people, right? You're talking about potentially, right? Obviously, not every single person with Game Pass is going to play every single game that is on Game Pass, but you get a huge chunk of people with a very low barrier of entry that can try your game. If they like it, they can buy it if they want. And even if they don't buy it, they can tell their friend, yo, I played this game and it is so awesome. You're getting a game into so many people's hands so quickly that word of mouth is essentially free marketing. If you're a publisher, if you're a studio, you're basically getting free marketing to tens of millions of people.
And even we're starting to see not only indies, but we're starting to see big third-party publishers recognize that with Outriders. I'm sure Outriders, again, as we talked about, Outriders is a new IP. New IP comes with a lot of risk. I'm sure Square looked at Game Pass and looked at what that could do for player count, marketing, and said, you know what? We can probably alleviate some of this risk and some of this fear of sales if we use Game Pass as a way to market the game. Obviously, the game still sold incredibly well on Steam. It broke records on Steam, so it did well outside of the platform, which again is huge. And again, you have the marketing. Crossplay was probably another huge factor in that. You have your friends who are playing on Xbox. Hey, I'm gonna play this. Like, I don't have an Xbox. I'll get it on PC though. And it's kind of that simple. Even though crossplay was a nightmare, and
even though it was busted. Well, I don't think they ever expected the kind of metrics that they hit on Outriders. I don't think Enix or People Can Fly ever anticipated that. I mean, just on Steam alone, and we never got, the Game Pass players. I'm sure that was astronomical. So just Steam alone, it was hitting like 140,000 plus concurrent. I mean, those are some crazy numbers for a new IP. So I'm sure they never expected that.
Yeah. I'm gonna get to a couple super chats here real quick. Had some awesome people throwing some support. Really appreciate y'all. Isma Easy says, hardware sales is not a win. PlayStation sell at a loss. Monthly active user is the real metrics to watch. What's the point of selling a console if nobody buys games on it and play most of their time on Game Pass? So what is your take on, the future of hardware sales? And I'll preface this by saying that I think moving forward, the NPD data regarding console sales is going to become less and less relevant long term. So what is your take on that?
I'm a little different on that. I think it depends on your business. I do not anticipate Sony following Microsoft's overall view of gaming. I'll just be frank. Yeah. I don't think they see it the same way. So, and Sony makes an astronomical amount of money selling games. I mean, they make more money than Microsoft or Nintendo, right? They make the most money right now in the gaming industry for a platform holder. So, and I do think Microsoft's going to continue to go up. Don't get me wrong by any means. I think Microsoft is headed in the right direction. But I think from Sony's point of view, will they go a little bit more down this path? Will they try to get more, players, more stuff like that? Yes, but I don't see a scenario anytime in the next 5 years you get the next God of War or Horizon free on day one with a subscription service for them. Like, I don't see that happening. I would love to be wrong, right? I would love a competitor to Game Pass from PlayStation. I just don't think they're going to go down that route because they make so much money selling games. So I think it depends, right? I think for Microsoft, I 100% agree that install base strictly on Xbox consoles is going to become less and less important. Not that they don't care about console, but you can access their games in so many different methods now, right? Whether, like we said, your phone, your mobile device, whether it's going to be on a PC browser, whether it's going to be through Steam, whether it's going to be through Windows Store, buying games, Game Pass. Like, Microsoft's giving you so many options that strictly how many consoles they sell is not going to be near as relevant. But I would say if you're like in Sony's boat or particularly Nintendo's boat, hardware sales still mean a lot. And I think they will mean a lot to them for quite a long time, because I just think that they're a little separate, right? I feel like we're seeing a bit of a diverging of the market. It used to be that Sony and Microsoft were so similar, people joked and called them the HD twins because their business and everything felt nearly identical, right? They were trying to sell you the same kind of games, their hardware felt the same, everything felt the same. Now they feel different to me. Like Microsoft's ecosystem, Sony's ecosystem, Nintendo, they all feel different. And I think there's room for success on all of them. So I think that how important and relevant hardware sales are kind of depend on your strategy.
That's a really good point. And we've had Jim Ryan kind of come out and basically say, to your point regarding a direct competitor to Xbox Game Pass, he has come out and basically said that their business currently is not built to support a platform like that. And so that's a really interesting point. We have a lot of people in the Xbox space pushing to have PlayStation do something that matches Xbox Game Pass. And then you have people in the PlayStation space who are saying, these games are doing well, they're selling well, they're making a ton of money. So why would they do that? And so it is interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how everything kind of plays out with that. I will hit you with one further question to that regard. Do you think that PlayStation is going to start leveraging PC more aggressively as a way to basically kind of make up the difference when it comes to game sales?
100%. So my big question though with that is going to strictly be like, are we talking day one PC or are we talking like we see now? Days Gone coming quite a bit later, like we saw with Horizon Zero Dawn, where it came quite a bit later. It's like, because honestly, I don't know the answer to this question. I can tell you, and I'm not Mr. Insider, okay? I don't do this insider stuff all the time, but I can tell you that there are Sony games that have been designed already to have PC in mind, okay? It is something that is kept in mind with development, okay? That's literally all I'm going to say on that. However, it's hard for me to think that they're going to ever be in a situation, or at least when I say ever, I'm trying to mean like the near future. Like, it's hard for me to envision them being in a situation where they're like, the next God of War is PC and PlayStation day one. That is really hard for me to believe. So I do think you will continue to see it. And I think you might see some games day one, right? Maybe if it's a really heavy multiplayer game, for example, I think that in particular could work very well being console and PC on day one. But these like really big single player, the things Sony's known for, these narrative cinematic games, they want to sell you that console. Okay. They want you to buy that PS5. They are hyper focused on that install base. So that to me is a little bit tough. But I do think you're going to see a lot of PlayStation games on PC. It just might be like we're seeing now, 2 to 3 years down the line after release, then they consider it.
Yeah, I do believe we're going to get to a point where, like you said, some games I think are going to launch simultaneously as a PlayStation console exclusive and on a PC, especially if there is a multiplayer element. Because as we've seen with all of the most successful multiplayer games, are multi-platform. If you want people to play your multiplayer game, you got to go to where they are. And that's just the reality. If you're trying to make money off battle passes, microtransactions, whatever, the likelihood of somebody buying a PS5 for this one game and then buying the battle pass is pretty small. But if you can say, hey, we made this, you can play it on PC with your friends, like that is going to open up a huge pool of opportunity. So yeah, I don't know if we'll see God of War day one on PS5 and PC at any point. But Jim Ryan has subtly been preparing people, PlayStation hardcore, for a shift in their business with how he's speaking in interviews and with what he's saying, and talking about these test PC releases to see what the reception was, to see how they sell, realizing that they do sell well. I think it's only a matter of time before we start seeing, maybe it's not 2-3 years out, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's a year. So you have the PlayStation hardcore who like, I'm not going to wait 6 months. I'm going to buy a PS5 for this. I'm going to play it. And then 6 months later, they can recoup some of those costs by like, it's on PC now too. So they understand that, even though the hardware is a big element of their business, it is their focus. It is what they're screaming from the rooftops. I think Jim Ryan especially understands that you really do have to cater to the broader audience. And as much as I love console gaming, as much as I'm a dirty console heathen, I think people understand that console gaming, in the grand scheme of things, people always get upset when I say this, but in the grand scheme of things, of people that exist in the world that have a interest at all in gaming, console gaming is fairly niche. And that's...
Oh, once you factor in stuff like mobile and PC, yeah, it's definitely much smaller.
And I think they understand that. And I think we're going to see a shift. I don't know how aggressive or how abrupt or how quick, but I'm not going to be surprised when I see a PlayStation exclusive launching day and date on PC.
Well, for example, like how much sense, and I think in a good way, how much sense would it have made to put Dreams on PC day one? Like that's a game to me. Like, yeah, that should have been PlayStation and PC, right? Because I feel like it did get lost in the shuffle on console only. And we've seen PC have a lot of success with some of these like creative type things. I mean, look at Minecraft. Minecraft started on PC, and I know there's a big difference between Minecraft's gameplay and something like Dreams. But what I mean is there is a market there that likes these creative type things, like how big Roblox is. Like Dreams in particular is like that kind of game that if I was Sony, I'm like, man, PC and console makes a lot of sense on this release. I think maybe Sony might just be a little like pick and choose, right? Like this game's going to be console for now. This game we might do day one on PC. We're going to look at each one. Because Microsoft does feel way more forward thinking than Sony in terms of like business strategy, right?
Yes.
They're going out there and they're like way more looking like, what's our business?
They're looking decades ahead. Like,
yeah. I feel like they are more forward thinking, and Sony is still, don't get me wrong, I'm sure that they're having these conversations as well, but they're still focused on like, how can we make PlayStation 5 right now the biggest success we can?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And again, it's I'm not going to come out and say that one's wrong and one's right, because we don't really have the data right now to say definitively that Xbox is right and Xbox is going to win, or that PlayStation is wrong. Because there's a lot of people that are saying PlayStation's failing and they're going to go bankrupt, or however they want to spin it, because they don't have a Game Pass answer. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's accurate at all. But I do think the success of Game Pass, especially when it starts getting to those big milestones, when Game Pass is at 50 million subscribers and PlayStation doesn't have an answer to that, it's gonna be tough. And again, some people don't like the parallel to streaming services, but let's be real. Netflix came out of the gate. Everyone criticized what they were doing. They exploded last year. Their value was higher than Disney, which is absurd. And then really, there's only been a few successes since then. We have HBO, I would consider a success, and Disney Plus, I would consider like a runaway success. But for every one of those, there's like 5 other ones that people are like, eh.
Peacock.
Peacock. Oh, yeah.
What?
Yeah, don't
just. No, I agree with you. Once Game Pass continues to escalate, it will absolutely put pressure on Sony in some kind of way, right? And one thing I always like to stress with like the video game industry and business is a lot of the talk is always around like versus sentiment, like who's number one, who hit that, who's number
the top
one
dog.
Yeah, I want people to keep in mind like their businesses can both be totally successful independently of each other, right? It doesn't have to be I must beat you to be a successful business, right? It does not have to be that way. Sometimes it is, right? Sometimes it really is about getting that big install base, but yeah, it can change. And I agree. Once we start hitting like 50 million plus subs, just the sheer amount of revenue that generates, I mean, Sony can't ignore that, right? So, but for me, again, like I said, it's hard for me to imagine like a God of War day one, on this subscription. But I would have said the same thing to you about Halo just 5 years ago, right? 5 years ago, if you would have asked me, will Microsoft just let you access Halo for free on a subscription? I'd be like, you are insane. There is no way they're going to do that. So maybe Sony does it. Maybe Sony does it. I know that there was belief in that company to not pursue that, but things could rapidly change with how, the market's going.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Is I'm sure Sony has a lot of big level people that I'm sure are paying attention. And I'm sure they're kind of waiting to see more or less how, Game Pass does. Probably the same way that Xbox has been looking to see how PSVR does. Because there's been a lot of people in the community who are like, why doesn't Xbox have an answer to VR? You got lambasted a bit with the Kinect, with the Xbox One. So I'm sure they're a little hesitant to like push this new hardware innovation and, have it kind of flop. So I'm sure people at Xbox are looking at PSVR as the metric, like, do people care enough? Is this something that we should offer? So yeah, to that end, I'm sure people at PlayStation are like, is Game Pass something that we need to do? Should we have a plan ready? Should we start, testing the waters with a few releases here and there to see what the reception is, to see if we can offset the cost with subs? Because yeah, I think realistically, once Microsoft hits those big numbers, it's going to be, it's going to be an uphill battle for PlayStation to kind of compete. And the mind share and the market share of everyone being like, I can play all these huge games in Game Pass. And then PlayStation, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, which will probably segue into our next topic, is charging $70 for all of their first-party games. Like, there's no option for Game Pass. You pay $70 if you want to play our games. But before we segue into that, I'm going to get into some super chats. We have people killing it over here. King 2002. The minimum target 343 needs to hit with Infinite is to be the best 343 Halo game. It needs to be constant content once it launches to be successful long term.
Yep.
I'll take it one step further. This needs to be the best Halo game ever made.
It definitely needs to be up there, right?
This needs to be Halo 1 level. Like, everyone is talking about this. And it sucks for that team. It really does. But that's the reality of the situation that they're in with Halo Infinite. Halo 5 was fine, but they are losing market share in the shooter space. And Halo used to be the definitive shooter. Xbox was selling gangbusters of consoles with Halo. And that's
why I bought Xbox.
And
that's really why.
That has dwindled. That has dwindled a lot. There's, people don't really care as much about Halo, and it breaks my heart as a big Halo guy, but Halo Infinite needs to come out of the gate strong and reinvigorate, the reason everyone fell in love with Halo in the first place. So yes, definitely needs to be the best 343 Halo. I would say it really needs to be the best Halo. And that sucks for that team because that's a lot of pressure. And I think they understand that. I think everyone working on that game, and Microsoft, who has the coalition helping out on it, who has put so absurd amounts of money into Halo. Halo Infinite's an expensive game.
That's what I was about to say. With how massive the team size is working on Infinite, yeah, it has to be good. It has to, just to justify that budget, because we are talking that the team size on Infinite is astronomical, even by AAA standards. So it really needs to be good.
Please let it be good. Please.
If not, with that budget, that's gonna be a little scary.
Gonna hurt. But yeah, because Halo 5, retroactively, everyone says it's really bad and a terrible game. Like, it didn't review poorly. It didn't sell poorly. But in the world of Halo, where so many of your games are incredible, when you have just a good game, it really stands out. And there's a lot of hyperbole that gets thrown around. Like, Halo 5 was not a great game. It was not a great Halo game at all. And just a standard shooter, it was just kind of fine from the campaign perspective. So that's what sucks when you have these massive, beloved franchises that just hit and hit and hit. When there's a game that doesn't hit, it resonates and it sticks. I mean, Halo 6 was supposed to come out, I think, 2 years after Halo 5, something like that. But Halo 5 hit and they're like, oof, yikes. Okay, we're going to have to reconsider what we're doing because people did not like that.
This will be the longest development cycle ever for a Halo game. So with a massive team.
So yes, I hope Halo does well because it's probably the most expensive Xbox first-party game that's ever been made.
Yeah, I believe it is. Yes, yeah,
by a fair margin.
Yeah, by quite a bit, I think too.
Another super chat from Poochie. Phil said 4 AAA games a year, so I'd imagine 1 big game per quarter, maybe. I think that's a good metric. I know Phil's come out and basically said that is their goal from first party, is they want 1 big first-party game, basically a quarter. But
I think it's the near term, but it could be faster than that later.
Yeah.
Just math, right? 23 studios. You factor each studio takes 3, maybe 4 years to make a game. Just depends on if it's a new IP or a sequel. And then some of those having 2 teams, like if you just bust the math out, it eventually equals quicker than once a quarter. So, but near term, right? They need to build to that, right?
Exactly.
It's not like, hey, we're just gonna have a game every other month starting in 2 months, right? They got to build there. But yeah, for the short term goal, like the next year-ish or so, yeah, I think a game a quarter makes sense until all those studios are firing.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's why he said that, is like they can realistically probably start doing that next year. And then probably the year after that, we're going to start hearing more. But yeah, that's a good goal. And that, again, still, that as long as they can fill the gaps with third-party games and other things to keep people excited, that's a good way to build the service for now. But they want to be, again, people don't like this, but they understand how Netflix has succeeded. And Netflix isn't succeeding necessarily with big, you know, non-first party kind of content. Netflix is succeeding with original content. Netflix exclusives are the reason people stay subscribed to Netflix. And Xbox understands that. And so the third parties are a way to bring attention to the service and fill in the gaps for now. And then long term, I'm sure they'll start shifting away from third party and then have this just constant slate of first party.
That is so spot on. Like, it's literally exact. If you look at Netflix's business model when it very first started up, you know, it was all about getting TV shows from other places. It was all about getting movies from other places, right? Like, that is literally what their foundation was, oh, you know, you can watch The Office and, you know, whatever series here on Netflix. But as they built up their own stuff, you know, that transition to where now it's all about Netflix originals. And I think Game Pass will be similar. Of course, they're still going to love third party. They're still going to push third party. But yeah, just like you said with Netflix, started off pretty third party heavy with deals. But then once you get those 23 studios delivering, suddenly that becomes the main driver, I think.
There's some parallels. There's some undeniable parallels. And, you know, Netflix kind of, they disrupted the film and television industry in kind of the same way that people are calling Game Pass disruptive for the gaming industry. But it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Detour Super Chat here. Mr. Joanna Dark says, "Hello, Benji. I would like to know your gaming origin story and top 5 favorite games of all time."
Ooh, this is
putting you on the spot, bro.
Okay. So gaming history, the way it started for me, little kid, right? I think I was like maybe 5. I don't know the exact. It was right around there, right? 5, 6, little kid. It kicked off for me with the Super Nintendo. My uncle bought me and my sister our very first console, the SNES, Super Mario World, you know, Donkey Kong Country.
Let's go.
You know, that's my roots, like the very original roots, right? Started with SNES. Then the generation after that, my parents, you know, let me pick like one. They're like, you can get one console. I actually went with the PlayStation 1 at the time, right? I chose the PS1 on there. The big stuff for me were games like Metal Gear Solid, Final Fantasy 7, you know, etc. Of course, you all know the big ones. And then after that, I started going more into like multi-console ownership. You know, I would have the original Xbox, the 360, the Xbox One, the PS4, the PS5, the, you know, Nintendo, everything. Now I just buy it all, right? Because I'm a sucker and I'm obsessed with games. But so yeah, it's like a lifelong passion for me. You know, that really is what translated me into even looking at sales data and business, was because I love games so much that I became very interested in knowing how they were performing, right? Because I was like, I love this game. Is anyone buying it? Is it just me buying this game, or is other people buying this game? And that's really what translated me over to the sales side of it. So that's kind of like my origins and my roots. And for top 5 games, man, that is brutally difficult.
Dude, I go back and forth, and it changes like week to week, I feel like.
Yeah, and I'm someone that's like one of those guys that plays like every genre. Like, I play everything, right? Some people really love shooters, or they really love RPGs, or they have like one or two. I'm like, give it all to me. I want to play all sorts of everything. But a few that stand out, Halo 2 and Halo 3 are very important to me, because those are like hardcore memories of multiplayer with my friends. I loved those campaigns as well, but man, just with my buddies playing Halo 2, playing Halo 3, that's going to be huge up there. Final Fantasy 7, like I mentioned, is big for me because that was the first RPG like that I had ever played in my life. So at the time, it literally blew my mind, right? I had never experienced anything like. I'm like, wait, games can have stories and characters like this? What? Yeah, I didn't know. I'm used to like, you know, Donkey Kong Country and Mario, which are fun, but you're not playing them for their deep, epic plots. So Final Fantasy 7 was a big one for me. I love Red Dead Redemption 2. I think that is one of the best written games I have ever played, strictly in terms of writing. And I'm somebody that really likes writing and narrative and stories. But I could go on, right? This is just a few off the top of my head, but I'm an addict. I don't want to sit here for an hour and tell you all about all the amazing games out there.
All right, appreciate that. No, that's awesome to hear. Yeah, it's we kind of have some parallels there, and because I think the very first game, actually, I know the very first game I ever played was A Link to the Past on Super Nintendo, and that was just like, this is what gaming is? What? And that just blew my mind. And ever since that day, I've loved it. And like you, I had Super Nintendo, went to PS1, went to GameCube, and then like right around the GameCube era, I got an Xbox as well. And then from then on out, I had basically all of them: PS2, GameCube, Xbox, and then pretty much every generation. I was the sucker, like working my summer jobs and stuff to buy every single console. I'm like, I need it. And still to this day, I always have all the biggest platforms and the PC as well. Just keep it well balanced, you know. I always have people who like say, Nintendo's trash or Nintendo doesn't have anything. I'm like, what are you saying? That's wild. Mario Odyssey, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. But again, that's right.
Nintendo's definitely the one I play the least, I would say, out of them all. But here's the thing: when Nintendo knocks it out of the park, they knock it out of the park. So
when Nintendo has a game I do play, I'm putting 200 hours in it.
Yeah, I'm raging it. So I would say that they're the one I play the least, but man, they still definitely put out some amazing stuff too.
Some more super chats. Benji-Sales, is Xbox updating their cloud servers at the same time, or is Sony just producing so much more units? Retail seems to be 2-to-1, both selling out, obviously. I'll comment on this real quick and I'll kick it over to you. I know Xbox is updating their server blades, and I know that is a factor in terms of why there isn't like more in the market, is because they're trying to basically get the xCloud updated with the new consoles. At least with the kind of Series S server blades. I don't know what the ratio is though. I don't know if you have any additional details or what you've heard there, but that's the information that I've received as to why.
Yeah, so I can add to this. I can agree with you and say that shipments are far higher for PS5 right now. They're just putting more consoles out into inventory at retail. I have a theory on this. I don't know this for 100% sure, but I think Sony's paying a premium to have more consoles manufactured during a chip shortage. I don't know this for sure, right? I haven't heard Sony themselves confirm this, but I have a theory that's part of why they're taking a bigger loss on PlayStation 5 right now. I believe that they are paying a premium to get, because you can. I mean, if you put enough money out there, you can get more chips than somebody else. It's how much money are you willing to pay to get them manufactured? And I believe that is part of it, because the gap is pretty large in terms of not just like, here's the thing, Series X and Series S would be selling way more than they are right now. And they're selling well, right? We saw that giant boost in hardware revenue, but they'd be selling even better if they could put more out there. You know, I could be wrong on this, y'all. I'm not telling you I know this for sure from Sony, but just seeing how much more consistent they are than Microsoft putting chips out whenever these consoles are fairly similar. There's differences, but it's a fairly similar manufacturing process. The fact they can get so many more out makes me think that they're paying a premium to have their consoles made.
And if you know, console hardware is what they're using as their metric for success right now in terms of what they're shouting from the rooftops, then it makes sense that they would be willing to, you know, pay those premiums if, you know, maybe they're making less or selling at a loss right now, but they can at least use that number for their investors and say, hey, we're doing this every month. We can tell you that we've sold 1 million PS5s. And if again, that makes sense if that is their biggest metric for success, is they want to make sure, like, even if they're paying more, they're going to do what they have to do to make sure that there are PS5s to buy.
And we have some evidence that they'd be willing to do that, because if you remember back during PS5 launch timeframe, they were talking about how they were going to pay for air shipping on PlayStation 5s, which is far more expensive to do that. So we do have evidence that they are willing to take a bigger hit to get more consoles out there as quickly as possible. So I believe that also lends a little credence to that they might be spending a bit of a premium in the manufacturing process as well.
Yeah. Y'all are killing it with super chats. Got several more here I'm going to get to. Highlander 001. Do you think COVID-19 is playing a part on how Game Pass is doing? I think so. I think we can look at, again, like Netflix as well. There's been a huge surge in subscription services because there's a lot more people sitting at home. Like, we know for a fact more people are engaging and playing with games right now. And since the pandemic, gaming has seen a huge surge. So I think that is definitely a factor in Game Pass. You have people sitting around bored, like, I'm not going out to drink, or I'm not doing XYZ because I don't want to get infected. So I'm just going to sit at home and I'm going to play Game Pass. And I have hundreds of games I can play. So I'll keep myself entertained. So I don't know what your thoughts are there, but that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Definitely COVID had an impact. It had an impact industry wide, whether it's going to be console sales, Game Pass subscriptions, just like the entire video game industry saw a crazy lift last year. So keep in mind the last year before a console transition, usually you see like stuff go way down, right? Because you're at the very end of the life cycle of the other consoles. Everyone's getting ready for the new ones. In fact, we saw the opposite. Last year was a gigantic year for the industry, even though it was the final year of the last gen consoles. And definitely COVID was a big impact to that. The one thing I can say is I don't expect that to like radically drop off. You see some analysts and people say that they think that, that was like a short-term bubble, and that, once things are back to normal, everything goes back down. But I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that turned a lot of people into new gamers that aren't traditionally gamers. It got people more invested in the industry maybe than they were before. And I think overall it will give a long-term boost to video games.
Yeah, I know a lot of friends just from like, personally, who basically had kind of fallen out of playing games, like had gone on a huge break, just weren't really that interested, and then like jumped back into it and realized, how easy it is and like what gaming is now, and they're like, oh wow, this is awesome. And now like I don't see them just stopping that. I don't see them just being like, I'm done with gaming. I can go outside now. I'm not going to play games anymore. So yeah, I think there is going to be some drop off, but I think realistically what this did ultimately for the industry is just get more people invested who weren't, or reinvigorated the interests of people who had fallen out of gaming, because it was expensive, man, to play games back in the day. I remember getting a Pokemon Stadium cartridge for like $90 in the 90s, which was probably like $130 for Pokemon Stadium. Can you imagine if PS5 exclusives were $130?
Woo. Yeah, people are getting mad over a $10 increase. It's like I don't mean to like brush it off as lightly, but yeah, if you look at game prices, they used to be crazy, especially when adjusting for inflation. Like, yeah, they used to be crazy.
Donkey Kong Country 2 was $50 in like 1994, 5 or 6.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Whew, man. Oh, good Lord. All right, Victor Alistine with another super chat. Couldn't Microsoft get Sony games on PC Game Pass? Yes, depending on the publisher. It gets complicated. If Sony is the publisher for it, probably not. I don't imagine Sony's going to be like, hey, here you go. Put this in Game Pass. We don't want to sell it on PC. We're just going to let you put it on PC Game Pass. But something like Death Stranding, which is published by 505, that's a different story. That's a different conversation, as we've seen with MLB. I'm sure Sony was not stoked that MLB was on Xbox Game Pass. In fact, I know for a fact they are very salty about it, because MLB, the show, the official Twitter handle, does not mention Game Pass ever once at all. They acknowledge that it exists on Xbox. You can buy it on Xbox, but they have not acknowledged Game Pass as a thing at all, which to me is just hilarious. And that shows that they are salty about that deal. That was a deal that they were not very keen on. So I think, again, I've heard some things regarding Death Stranding coming to Game Pass in some capacity. And on console, I think that's more complicated. But if 505 is like, hey, we're publishing it on PC and Microsoft is going to give us money on the PC, maybe they sneak it into PC Game Pass.
Yep. Technically they can. Technically speaking, even if Sony agreed to it, they could put Days Gone on there if they want, right? Because it's all on the same platform. But I agree. Like you said, I think it's going to be ones they don't publish, because it's hard for me to believe that Sony would agree like, hey, Microsoft, here you go. Here's Days Gone and Horizon Zero Dawn on Game Pass. I just don't see them. So technically speaking, yes, they could. It's all the same platform. But yeah, I think it's going to be stuff like you said, stuff that maybe they had a partnership on, but they themselves are not the publisher of the PC version. That's probably going to be your best bet.
Yeah, because it's going to, especially if they put something in a Game Pass and it's wildly successful, imagine the narrative that spins for PlayStation. Like that's
point.
That's proof that it works with their games and people will play it, but they're then going to turn around and be like, "Oh no, we're not going to do that." So, yeah, that would be a weird conversation. I'd love to be in a conference room with Xbox pitching this to PlayStation, be like, "Hey, we'd love to get for Horizon Zero Dawn into Game Pass. Let's talk about that." I would love to see how that conversation would play out.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Joanna Dark with another super chat. What are your thoughts that indie/smaller games cannot cost the same as a first-party AAA title, even if it's better or on par with those games? What's your take on that? The value proposition of a game. What is your take on that?
Ooh, that is a tough one. Here's the thing. Here's the main thing I would say is if you're an indie team, like you yourselves as the indie team, it's probably a better bet to not price yourself as high, right? And I'm not saying anything to do with quality. I'm not saying anything to do with these games can't be competitive, but there is just a reality that there is a perception difference there in the market. There's just no debate on it. So I would not encourage indie games to go out there and be like, we're 60, $70, let's go. Like, I would not suggest that. And the other big gap that you're going to see there also is strictly in marketing, right? The facts are, as much as Microsoft, as much as Sony love indies, do you think they're going to put the same marketing budget behind an indie game as they are the next God of War or Halo? Like, it's just not going to happen, right? Yeah. Those games are going to get a much larger push. So pricing your game high as an indie game, it's just really risky. Even if your quality is there, you're already gambling just being indie by itself. And then also putting a high price tag up, you're just elevating those barriers. So I would not suggest it. I think there are plenty of indie games that are just as good as any AAA game you'll ever play. But I think it is smart to not go for that full price tag.
Yeah, and it's a tough conversation when you start saying, like, how do we dictate, like, these people put this much time and effort in, smaller team, they put out a great game. Is it fair for us to say that it's not as valuable as Assassin's Creed Origins or, whatever it might, Call of Duty? Like, it's tough. And yeah, like you said, as an indie team, it's hard to kind of justify that to a wide audience. People invested in the community probably understand and more willing to pay that, but a casual person is probably way more critical of that price tag, and that's going to kind of affect your overall appeal. So I'm not going to say that indie games can't be full priced and that indie games are not worth a full price tag, but yeah, it's a struggle for them to justify that to a wide audience.
Right.
A quick shout out to the 270 people rocking with us today. Really appreciate you guys. Again, if you're liking the show, hit that like button, share it out. Let's see if we can push 300. Boom. And I'm gonna get to a few more.
300.
Let's do it. Super chat from Sampo. Over under 50%. Will Infinite be a Game of the Year nominee?
Ooh.
It won't be at the Game Awards because it comes out too late.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
So in terms of Game Awards, no. Just simply because it comes out too late after they've already closed the deals. What do you think? Is Halo in the community conversation, in the industry conversation, is Halo going to be in the Game of the Year talks?
Here's what I will say. That is going to be tough, but at the same time, this isn't going to actually end up being the most stacked year ever compared to some years because of so many COVID delays. So that makes it, potentially better. But it's tough, right? I mean, it is tough to break into that top Game of the Year contention, especially with a game that, at least from the outside, seems to have had some struggles in development, right? And that's not abnormal. A lot of games struggle in development. I mean, The Last of Us, which is, the original one, which is one of the most awarded games ever, like literally like 2 months before launch, they were not sure how that game was going to ship in terms of quality because it was so bug ridden. Like there was a lot of things, if you read Jason Schreier's book, they had all kinds of issues with that. And it was really at the last minute, they nailed that thing in. That lasts like 3 to 6 months. They finally locked it down. So, and people loved it. So Halo could very well be the same. It's just, here's the reality is a lot of games that go up for that Game of the Year contention are your cinematic, story heavy games. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. There's a reason Sony consistently hits high on that because, critically, the critics love that kind of thing. So that alone makes it tougher, being, a game that obviously is going to have a big campaign, but heavily multiplayer focused as well. Not impossible. Look at Overwatch, right? Overwatch won the Game Awards award. So I would say it's possible. I think stuff like Resident Evil 8 Village, though, is going to be the ones to watch out for. I can't go too much into that, but I know a couple people playing that game, and watch out for Village.
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky people playing that right now, and it's obviously I can't say anything because of embargo stuff. But
sorry, my camera's blurry. By the way, it lost focus.
Oh
sorry.
No, it's all good. Yeah, I would love to see Halo Infinite in those conversations. Shooters are tough. Shooters, even if they're incredible, they rarely get kind of bundled into those conversations, which is unfortunate. So it would be awesome if Halo Infinite could come out and get itself in the conversations. And again, I think that alone would show, a success for Xbox Game Studios. But yeah, I don't know. It depends what else comes out this year, I guess. And like you said, it's probably not going to be that stacked in terms of massive AAA releases this fall. So that helps Halo's chances.
Mm-hmm. One thing I'll add on to that really quick before we move away from it is I do think it's very important that Microsoft gets some kind of game soon in that Game of the Year contention conversation. I do think that there is that belief and that discussion points out there that Microsoft, quote, quote, can't deliver a Game of the Year caliber game. Because just to be honest, they haven't had many games that have got in that contention space in recent years. So I do think if I was Microsoft, I don't think you need to hyper focus on it. Like, every game we make must be 95 Metacritic, because that's just like a dangerous way to approach game development. But if I was them, I would really focus. Like, we need one of those kinds of games that does fit that bill, because that is the one thing in their portfolio right now that they just quite haven't delivered on yet in terms of like critical reception. That critical Game of the Year contender. You just don't really see that. So I think they need to get something in there.
I totally agree. They need just, again, this is mostly just a cred thing. It doesn't even like do that much in terms of like industry success as we've seen in revenue, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, just so that narrative goes away. And so it's not this constant nagging thing when you're on social medias. Oh, look at this. Because I can't stand when somebody this game's awesome, I like it, it's fun, and then somebody like takes a screenshot of Uncharted 4 or The Last of Us 2's Metacritic and just comments that. I'm like, what? Mm-hmm. One game being great does not mean another game is not good, which is this weird narrative that some people like to push. And Metacritic inherently isn't bad. But the way that some people weaponize it online is one of my least favorite parts of engaging on social media.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a dumpster fire. True Gamer coming in says Konami pulled out of E3, but said they are working on some games and will announce them in a few months. Does Xbox have any involvement with said games? Benji, you have any inside deets on Konami cross Xbox?
I have to be careful what I say about Konami.
So you do, huh? Is that what you're telling me?
I mean,
I'm not gonna.
This will get me in trouble, but I've mentioned it before on my live chat. Like, I'm aware of something with what's going on with the whole Silent Hill debacle that everyone's always talking about. I do not know for 1,000% sure that what I have heard is real. However, I try to not talk too much about Konami because one of the things that I've heard, like, not many people would know that. So I don't want to burn that source. So
definitely don't. I'm not.
Yeah. In terms of like things with Xbox particularly, I have no knowledge on that. That is one thing I can say. Don't know anything about that.
Yeah, I don't have any concrete details that say yes, Konami is 100% sure working with Xbox on something. But I do know that Konami is kind of reevaluating its biggest IP, Silent Hill, Castlevania, and they are trying to they're having people, from what I've heard, again, don't know that this is 100% accurate, they are having people pitch projects to them for their IP. So they are saying, hey, we want a Silent Hill, we want a Castlevania, what are your ideas? And they're trying to find the right partners. So I don't know that Xbox first party is in those conversations, but I guarantee people, are pitching that. And it would be a huge boon for PlayStation or Xbox if they could come out and say, like, hey, the new Silent Hill is a PlayStation exclusive, or hey, the new Castlevania is an Xbox exclusive, and we have X team working on it. I know there have been several pitches for Silent Hill, and I am quite confident we will see Silent Hill announced in some capacity sometime soon. I don't know who's making it. There's been rumors, Bloober has been one of the teams in the conversations. There's been a few other people. I don't think it's going to be a PlayStation exclusive. I know that's part of the conversations people have been throwing around. I don't think that's the reality. People were saying Japan Studio was involved with that potentially, but as we've seen, they are kind of shifting that focus, dissolving that. So I don't think that's going to be it. So I'm not in the camp that Silent Hill will be a PlayStation exclusive, but I am in the camp that we are getting a Silent Hill probably soon.
Yes.
Probably soon.
Yeah. Yeah. They 100% want to do something with that IP. Yes.
They've at least publicly acknowledged that Contra Rogue Core and Metal Gear Survive were just big turds, and they're not going to put out garbage like that anymore. So at least they learned from that. And, for a while, I was like, I didn't even want them to announce a new Silent Hill. I didn't even want them to announce a new Castlevania because I knew whatever it was going to be just terrible. Just a cheap shell of what it was, and it was just going to break my heart to see. I bought Contra Rogue Core just to see what that was. I knew it wasn't going to be good, but
I did not. I didn't play that, and I didn't play Metal Gear Survive either. Totally skip both.
Let me say this. Metal Gear Survive, the most fun thing about that game was being in the lobby before the game started, shooting your friends in the knees, because your legs would shoot out from under you and fall down. So that's a red flag. When you don't want the game to start because you're having more fun in the lobby to the game, that's not a good game. That's
not good.
That's not a good game. And yeah, so I'm glad Konami is at least trying to get the right people to help out. For a while, it was because Konami was making a ton of money doing nothing. They didn't have to do anything, and they were making more money than they've ever made. So the incentive for them to like R&D and research and pay a team to make a game just didn't make sense because they were just raking in money from merchandise and their pachinko machines.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm glad they're reevaluating and they're trying to have these, because Konami was such a huge part of my childhood. Silent Hill, Castlevania, so many of those franchises are some of my favorite franchises ever. So I want those. I for the longest time, I just wanted anyone to buy the rights from Konami just to have, I didn't care who it was, PlayStation, Xbox, Amazon, anyone. I wanted somebody to take the IP from Konami because they were just hoarding it. But it sounds like they are invested in making sure that whatever comes out for Silent Hill next is going to be good. And whatever comes out next for Castlevania is going to be good. So I hope. Please. Silent Hill. Did you play Silent Hill Downpour?
Downpour. Which one was that? Was that the 360?
That was the 360 one that Korn did the soundtrack to.
With the kid, right? Is it like a little brother or something?
That was Homecoming.
Oh, okay.
Which was also Homecoming was also kind of not good.
I played Homecoming. I did not play Downpour. I can tell you though that Silent Hill 2, when I played it with my buddy as a kid back in the day, I literally was scarred at the time. I was so terrified. So I have a special place in my heart as well for Silent Hill.
Yeah, Silent Hill 2 was one of those games I could only play in like 20-minute bursts. I was just waiting for the save room. Like, please, no, I'm done. So, yes, I want a good Silent Hill. I think we'll get one. But yeah, it was weird that Konami pulled out because that was one we were expecting. And honestly, I was expecting Silent Hill to be revealed at E3.
So, again, kind of like I mentioned before, I know a little bit. I know there was a plan, at least at one point in time, not that long ago, that Silent Hill was going to in some capacity be at E3 this year. But the fact it's not makes me wonder, because I haven't heard an update on that game in quite some time. But from what I had heard a while back, the plan was E3 2021. They were going to show something. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe that got production troubles or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure COVID was a factor, probably. Yeah. Like it seems like Japan studios in particular seem to be having a harder time adjusting to the work from home, from just what we've seen historically with announcements and delays, and how quiet companies like Nintendo have been for the longest time with their first party stuff. So
yeah, real quiet.
So hopefully, sometime this year we're on the other side of this thing, guys. Hope. All right, I think one more super chat here. PC Game Boy. I am surprised there isn't tons of people asking Microsoft to make Xbox Live tied to Game Pass. Why make Xbox players pay for both, but not PC players? And I think that kind of ties into what we talked about earlier with they make a lot of money on it. And it's one of those things where they could just flip a switch and like change that. Because I've complained about this publicly. I can go on my PC, I can play Sea of Thieves, I can use Xbox Party Chat on my PC without paying for gold. I can do that, no problem. But on my console, I have to pay money to do that same thing, which is kind of a slap in the face to the more hardcore invested in the console space, because they know people on PC can do this for free, but on console you still have to pay for it. So I guess we can, yeah, let's talk about this. Xbox Live Gold. Is it going away, and when is it going away?
I think it will. Yeah, I think gold is actually going to go away one day on consoles. It's kind of counterintuitive to everything Microsoft preaches right now for their business, right?
It really is.
Everything it is, right? Everything Microsoft talks about right now is ease of access with games, play your games any way you want, lowest barrier of entry possible. You know, we want you to just be able to play your games however you want to. And putting a paywall behind multiplayer kind of is counterintuitive to all of that, right? Especially whenever, like we mentioned, on PC, you don't need it. I do believe that you will see gold go away one day, but that's not going to be until Game Pass gets a high enough subscription rate that they can take that away. Because the reality is for so many years, they've made so much money on gold, right? You don't just want to instantly throw away that revenue and then with your investors the next quarter, you're like, oh, we made, 80% less in revenue, or, whatever it would be, because we just lost millions of subscribers, right? You wouldn't do that. But I do truly believe that once Game Pass gets high enough that it is eclipsing whatever they would have lost with gold, or, past it in terms of way more profitable, I do think you'll see that go away eventually. One day. Exactly when, who knows? But I do think at some point it goes away.
I agree. And I think the leadership understands that, and they understand that confusing messaging where, again, they have all these like player centric and consumer centric services, and Xbox Gold is kind of like a beacon of the past that they are hanging on to, just because, again, like you said, they're not just going to pull all that money away and tell their investors like, hey, we did this because we want to, be nice to our customers. And like, okay, cool.
Well, where's the money?
Where's my bottom line? So they have to make up the difference. And that's why Game Pass has been a huge push. I've heard some figures. I'm comfortable throwing out that from what I've heard, internal metrics are shooting for like 50 million in terms of, once Game Pass hits 50 million, I can see them being like, all right, guess what? Gold's gone. Yeah, it's free for everyone. Yay. Peace, love, harmony. But for now, they still need to make that money, and they still want to make that money. But I know the leadership team at Xbox understands that confusing messaging and wants the paywall for Live to go away as soon as possible.
Yep. It just makes sense, right? It makes sense with everything else they're talking about. It's going to eventually, but 50 million makes sense, right? That's a big number. That's enough that I'm sure they could probably just get rid of gold completely and never even notice it on their earnings report. Yeah, 50 million sounds right.
But yeah, what the time frame is that maybe by the end of next year, we see 50 million as the metric. But again, that's not set in stone. Those are just some of the figures I've heard internally. And we know, Nadella's bonus this year is tied to Xbox Game Pass growth. So I'm sure they're going to be, doing what they got to do. Homie wants to get paid, so he's going to be pushing some Game Pass.
Yeah.
And that shows how committed Microsoft as a whole is into Xbox Game Pass and the Xbox division, which is exciting because we look back to 2017 and there was not a lot of support for the Xbox division. There was nobody on the Xbox team was on the board for Microsoft. And now we at least have Phil Spencer on the board for Microsoft as a main driver of Microsoft's kind of business strategy, which is cool.
Yeah, there was a couple of years there where things were actually very shaky for Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like, Phil has kind of hinted at that publicly now, but at the time, I think a lot of people didn't quite realize that there was a period of time where things were looking not so good.
That Xbox One launch was...
Whew.
That damaged the Xbox brand something really fierce, and they're still recovering from that, if we're being real.
Yep.
They have a lot of great momentum right now, but they've had to claw and scrap and work hard to win that goodwill back because, that launch was just... It was astronomically bad. They went from... It's kind of like what happened with the PS2 to the PS3. where you have this company that is used to being the top dog. They've done X, Y, and Z to succeed. They are in a position where they feel like no matter what we do, people are going to buy it because we've succeeded. And as we saw with the Kinect being bundled in and that $500 price tag, as we saw with the PS3 dropping at $600, people will not just buy anything you put out. That is not the reality. And people will go jump ship. Honestly, as we saw with Xbox One, there was a lot of Xbox players who were like, I'm just going to PS4. It's cheaper. And that momentum exploded, and PS4 just became a runaway success. So 360 went from being this huge runaway success in that generation, somehow coming as this like underdog console to overthrow the juggernaut PlayStation, which was coming off PS2, but the best selling console, home console of all time. The momentum for PS2 was huge. And then that was just gone with the PS3. Like that, they just hit a wall. And that's what Xbox did with the Xbox One. And this entire generation, they've been trying to like climb back from that. But
it's been like a whole gen to try to recover.
It's been this catch-22 where they were performing poorly, and so they weren't getting the funding they needed to counteract that, and so they were putting out kind of mediocre, middling games, not getting a ton of support, which wasn't helping grow the brand. It was only helping to kind of tank reception of the brand in the public eye, and so it was bad. It was really bad, and people don't really understand that. So,
and now look, the first 3 months of the year, this was the biggest first 3 months of the year they've ever had.
That's what happens when you
most successful beginning of the year they've had for Xbox.
Put the right people in the right place and give them the right support, and they can make great things. And I'm excited that Phil Spencer is on board with Xbox. I think he is a huge factor in why Xbox is where it is now. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that the dude loves gaming. The dude didn't really want to live in a world where Xbox just went away. And he was like, hey, this is what we have to do. What are we doing? Why is Xbox failing? Give me a chance. Give me some money. Give me some resources. Let's turn the ship around. And it's exciting because, like I have a preference for Xbox, but I've always had all the consoles, and it sucked being like an Xbox fan, just watching Xbox get just dominated for an entire generation. Like I wasn't going to argue with people that Xbox One was better than PlayStation 4. Because it really wasn't. It wasn't a more powerful machine. It didn't have better games, didn't have better services, really. So it's super exciting to be in a position now where that is the case. And you can say like, yo, Game Pass is awesome. Xbox Series X is an awesome machine. First party lineup for Xbox moving forward looks incredible. So there's actually some exciting competition this generation, which should make things way more interesting. And that doesn't mean that PlayStation is failing, which I think that's kind of been this narrative that's getting pushed because Xbox is now competing on like a more level playing field. People are saying that PlayStation's failing, and I'm like, no, PlayStation just isn't completely dominating the mind share of a lot of people now. We're on a level playing field. So
that's the difference. It's not that PlayStation is doing any worse than ever, because actually it's the contrary, right? PS5 is selling faster than PS4 did. It's just that it looks a little different in optics because now Microsoft actually is competitive in the market as well. Whereas before, last gen, I mean, PlayStation completely annihilated Xbox worldwide, right? So it made that vision of just 90% of the conversations about Sony. Whereas now you're starting to see a little bit more of a balance, and that's throwing off people's perspectives. But PlayStation's still doing great, and Xbox is way on the right trajectory now for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be really exciting. It's honestly, no matter where you're playing or what you're into, it's this kind of stuff just moves the industry forward. It forces people to innovate, whether it be services, whether it be games. I think Xbox, when it comes to Game Pass, they understood like, hey, we need to bolster our studios. That takes time. That takes a lot of time. In that time, what can we do to make the Xbox platform valuable? And they're like, all right, let's leverage our legacy. Let's increase backwards compatibility support. Let's make sure we have the best options for backwards compatibility. Xbox Game Pass. We're working on studios. We're working on games. Let's put all the games we have coming straight into the service as the best value proposition. And let's talk to our partners. Let's talk to these people we worked with for years, and let's see what games we can pull into to make the value proposition of Xbox strong. And now we're in a position where they've succeeded on these metrics, backwards compatibility, the value of Xbox Game Pass. and they've been, fostering these studios for a few years. So pretty soon they're going to have that trifecta of, great value, great games, and just a great piece of hardware, which is that's how you win people over. And that's, as we saw with the PS4, Sony had a ton of success doing that.
Yep. And their PR and marketing has been excellent lately.
They're winning awards. They're straight winning awards for their marketing. It's wild.
Their PR and marketing over the last 6 to 8 to 12 months, whatever, man, they have been on point with their branding and messaging. Like, honestly, it has really impressed me how good that Bethesda roundtable, for example, that was excellent. It was produced excellent. It was handled well. Their social channels are hilarious, right? They're posting hilarious things on the Xbox Twitter account all the time. Game Pass, the Game Pass Twitter account's amazing. Like, yeah, their messaging and branding and marketing especially has just been excellent lately.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, you look at that and there's so many brands on social media that want to be cool, they want to be hip, they want to be the fun brand, and it just comes off so dishonest, and it just comes off really cringy and gross. But Xbox has found a way to make it at least seem legitimate. Like, they at least have the right people. People want to have some fun with it. I understand they're a business. I understand they're trying to sell me stuff. I get that. I'm not ignoring that, but at the same time, at least they're being fun with it, and it comes off as genuine. Like, the people involved,
it doesn't feel phony,
are having a good time. You're getting The Rock, you're getting Snoop Dogg, all these like fun people to come in and just do a dumb video about like a fridge and stuff like that. Like, no other company's memeing, like taking a meme that the community made about how dumb the Xbox Series X looks, that it looks like a fridge, and they're like, you know what? Yeah, let's embrace it. We're going to take that and we're going to make it a product and sell it to you. That to me is just amazing. And
it's funny because as a counterpoint, Sony is so serious. Like, their Twitter account is so serious, which is fine because I think Sony's got great messaging too. It is just funny to see, like, if you follow both accounts on Twitter or whatever, like Xbox, they'll be serious and stuff, but they're posting jokes and memes and stuff. And like, at least the official PlayStation one, I've heard the UK one's a little bit more fun, but like the official PlayStation account is like deadly serious.
Yeah,
like 95% of the time.
Here is news. Here is a game we have. Check out this trailer, and that's not bad. I mean, it's it caters to
just different approaches.
Yeah, so it is cool, and they've been doing an amazing job. So Xbox has a ton of momentum, and it's exciting that we have a company like being fun. I remember in the 90s, you had PlayStation, you had Nintendo. Like, gaming messaging and marketing was fun and cheesy and silly, and it was like fit the vibe of gaming. And for a while that went away, and it was like, gaming is serious and we need to take gaming seriously, and we're only going to put serious messaging out in the world. And so it's
every game was gray and brown.
Yes, gaming is hardcore for adults who are 17.
Yeah, no, but we're seeing a lot more variety now, and I appreciate it. But yeah, shout out to Microsoft's marketing and messaging. They're doing great.
They're killing it. Super chat from another one from Victor Alistine. Gold free will be tough for PS5 still charging. That is an interesting point, and I think that for a long time that was the message that why should you have to pay for Xbox Gold on PlayStation? It's free. I don't have to pay for online on PlayStation. And now PlayStation is charging for online. So it would be funny if we get in a situation where Xbox is like, you don't have to pay for online, but PlayStation still is paying for it.
Whew, yeah, that is interesting, right? That is interesting, especially because they have 47 million PlayStation Plus subscribers. So it's like, whoo, that's a lot of people paying for online.
And
like, that is a lot.
And let's think about this. We have Game Pass get in a position where it has 50 million. They have this revenue stream that's doing incredibly well. PlayStation doesn't have an answer to Game Pass, and then Xbox drops Gold as an option and says online gaming is free. Here are all these services that are free, and then you have to pay for all the services on PlayStation. PlayStation is not going to be able to just say, all right, that's free now. Like, they can't.
At that point, they have to do something. Like, even if it's not completely dropping the paywall for PlayStation Plus, they'll have to. I truly believe once Game Pass is up to like 50 million range, they're gonna have to do something. I'm not exactly sure what that's gonna look like for them because, like we said, who knows if they're gonna do God of War on a PlayStation subscription? Who knows? But yeah, the value proposition of Xbox is just starting to get crazy, right? And especially if they drop that paywall too, like, It'd be crazy. Yeah, it gets crazy.
People at Sony would be sweating because they're at a point now where PS Plus is huge for them and they're making a ton of money on that subscription.
So much.
And they've been leveraging a lot of great, games in there. Like PS Plus is way better than Xbox Gold. I'm not going to argue that at all.
Not even close.
But PS Plus is not Game Pass. PS Plus is not on the same level as Xbox Game Pass. And they're not really, it doesn't seem like they are even trying to have PS Plus do that. So they're in this weird in between where Game Pass is kind of this forward thinking future thing. PS Plus is in between what Game Pass is shooting for and what Xbox Gold was. So I'm curious to see, once these numbers get bigger and there's more pressure on PlayStation, how they answer that. And that'll be something we'll just have to see.
I think that's one of the most interesting storylines. Like if you're into the business side of the gaming industry at all, like me, I think that is going to be one of the most interesting questions this generation is how Sony approaches Game Pass, like how they, quote respond to it. I don't think they need to panic by any means or freak out because again, the PlayStation business is doing astronomically well. But once that sub count gets super high, man, I mean, things get interesting. Things get very interesting.
Yes, it is. Yeah, especially for like someone like you, invest in those numbers. Those metrics are that's some fascinating figures because we know games are getting more and more expensive. Sony has said it, Xbox has said it. Anyone who makes games is telling you that making big games is super expensive. We look at some of our favorite games from Super Nintendo and some of the biggest games from Super Nintendo. That was like 3 to 5 people making a game in like 8 to 10 months. Like some of the biggest games of all time were made in like under a year by like 5 people. Fast forward to Halo Infinite, we got 600 people spending 5 years. Like,
oh yeah, woo. And some games bigger than that. Some games you got an Assassin's Creed with 1,000 people on it. Literally, quite literally, 1,000 people making Assassin's Creed. It's crazy.
It's crazy. So yeah, like those games need to sell like X million copies. Like that's not even an option. It's not like sick. We sold 10 million. That's awesome. It's like you didn't sell 10 million. You're done. That's it. You don't get
Days Gone.
Yeah, it's Days Gone. It didn't sell poorly. It was a new IP.
No.
It sold pretty well, but it
made money. But the problem is it just didn't make enough.
Exactly. It's for PlayStation. It's not about making money. Death Stranding, another prime example. That game did not sell poorly. That game sold fairly well. Again, for a weird new IP that sold well, that reviewed well, that sold well. But, from what we've heard, Kojima's shopping elsewhere because I don't think Sony's going to shell out that money again because Death Stranding, again, did not make enough money.
Yep. When you're in Sony's perspective and you're starting to see stuff like, what's happening with Horizon and The Last of Us and God of War, like, these games that are selling, more like 15 to 20 million instead of, 5 or 6 million, suddenly you want those big games. You're hitting those successes on some. So I'm sure at least in terms of Sony Studios, I kind of mentioned this before. Some people were like, does this mean Sony's not going to green light, new IP and things like that? I don't agree with that at all. I just think you got to have a really good pitch now. Like, you've got to really have something they think is going to be a colossal success.
Because now they're in this weird position where they've been like fostering this blockbuster, Metacritic focused. Our games are the best of the best. And so now they're in a position where
that's like their reputation now, right?
Yeah. If that isn't consistent, then they're in a position where like, all right, well, that's been our marketing push. That's been why we're selling PlayStations. Like if that starts to dwindle, actually they're in a position now where they won't even let that dwindle. Like that is not going to be an option for them. Like,
I think you're going to see mostly bangers, and that's mostly because that's all they're going to green light.
Yeah. Like if you agree to a project, it's going to be a banger one way or another. It's going to be a banger. So you better be in for whatever that means. Because, I've heard some horror stories about people working on some of those bangers and what it takes to make a banger. So as much
we could go into that, but it would be,
not gonna dive into it. But let's just say, like, I hope people really appreciate those bangers because there's some people on the inside who did not enjoy their experience making those bangers. So, but won't dive into that because that's like an hour in of itself. So we're getting towards the tail end here. We're going to do one more quick topic, and then we're going to wrap it up. So if you guys have any other questions, feel free to drop them in there. Huge shout out to everyone who's been hanging out with us. It's been an awesome time. Time has flown by. I can't believe we're already at 2 hours, basically. But before we go, I want to get real quick your take on $70 games. First off, is that justifiable to you and to the business? And is that something that a game like Returnal can thrive with?
Returnal's going to tell us a lot. Okay. Honestly, that is a very fascinating data point, and I'm very interested to see what numbers look like on that. I would say that and Ratchet and Clank are going to tell a lot. One thing I can say, one data point we do have now is that the early, and keep in mind we're early, we don't have a ton of evidence yet to make a bulletproof conclusion. The early evidence appears to be that $70 does not hinder sales.
Cool.
Call of Duty sold just as well as it's ever had at $70. Yes, it was down a little bit from Modern Warfare last year, but that was the biggest Call of Duty literally of all time. Modern Warfare was the biggest Call of Duty that's ever released. So it still did insane numbers for Cold War. The sports games that went at $70, like NBA, still sold excellent. So the early, very early, but keep in mind, we're talking massive franchises, right? We're talking Call of Duty. We're talking NBA. We're talking big, giant brands. The big question is going to be, how does this affect new IP, riskier sounding games like Returnal is? I think that is going to tell us a lot. If Returnal comes out and it sells a ton of copies, like, dude, it's done. It's $70. Like, Sony's not going to blink an eye at it, and I don't think I don't think other publishers will either.
Exactly.
And I'm gonna be honest with you. I expect everyone to be at 70 within the next couple of years for the biggest AAA games. I think even Microsoft is going to be at $70 for the biggest. Okay. One thing I would like to see is not just a blanket $70. And that is one thing about Returnal. I think that's a bit of a bummer, because if you do the math on Returnal, it's not a very super high budget game. It's just not, because their dev team, yes, it's AAA, but it's going to be on the very, very low side of AAA. The game was in total production for 4 years. Part of that, though, was pre-production. It sounds like heavy production was about 3 years, and their staff size was 75. That's not a giant budget. It's just not. So I would still like to see a few games come out more in that 60 range, maybe save 70s for the biggest, the craziest, the, Horizons and the God of Wars. But the reality is I think they're going to get away with it. I really do. There's a lot of uproar online about $70, but the early data doesn't seem to see that it's impacting sales.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see kind of how that all plays out, because, yeah, the games we've mentioned so far, your Call of Duties, your Maddens, those are games people buy every year, regardless of like review score. There's certain franchises that have that weight. So no matter what it is, no matter how it's reviewed, no matter what the price tag is, there is a large group of people who are going to buy it. Returnal, don't get me wrong, Returnal's my jam. An obscure horror roguelike that's brutally difficult, yes, sign me up, let's go. That on paper to a wide audience, that is niche. That is niche as hell.
Oh, yeah. It is.
That is weird. It's a weird AAA $70 game. And I love that PlayStation put money into it and is putting it out. My fear is that if this does not come out and crush it, then that is going to really hinder PlayStation investing in these weird kind of obscure AAA, quote unquote, because $70 is steep. We haven't seen a lot of games at $70. People will pay $70 for Call of Duty. Will they pay $70 for Returnal? I'm not saying Returnal is bad. I'm not saying Returnal isn't worth $70. That's not what I'm trying to push with this idea. I'm just saying that is a niche game. The nichest AAA game we've seen in a long ass time. I can't think of a game as niche in the AAA space as Returnal.
I mean, let's be honest about it. It would have nowhere near the buzz it has online if it didn't have PlayStation Studios on it. And I know it's a Housemarque game, which isn't, but it is a Sony-published PlayStation Studios game. Let's be real. If that branding's not there, I'm not saying the quality would be any different or reviews would be any lower. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm saying that's a testament to PlayStation, how good they've been about building that reputation, that putting that name on there gets it way more instant recognition than it otherwise would have. So yeah, we're talking a very, very niche type of setup up to a game. and this is going to say a lot, because what I mean is if this can succeed at 70, then just about everything can succeed at 70. I'm being honest with you, as long as the game's good. Like that, Returnal is a very important data point, because this is as niche as it's going to get. It's a bullet hell roguelike. I mean, you don't get two more niche genres combined. So if this can succeed, and we don't fully know that yet, if this can succeed, this to me is a green light to every publisher. It don't matter. I mean,
as long as $70, as long as the game's good,
as long as it's a good game and it's not like an indie, just throw that 70 tag on there. It's going to sell as long as it's good. So,
it's been reviewing well. Like the people that I know that have been playing it have been stoked on it. Like I'm a huge fan of roguelikes. I love the brutal difficulty, but I know there's been people who are like, this is too difficult. Like, I don't like this. And I know that's like a turnoff for like a wider audience. If you tell someone, hey, this game's insanely hard, and like, oh, I'm out. Like that will just instantly turn a group of people off.
I have only done the first biome, and I was good on that for the most part. Like I had one death, I died up to the boss, but everything before that wasn't too bad. But I've heard it ramps up brutally difficult once you hit the third biome. So I'm interested to see how this goes, because I know some people that are literally hard stuck on it. Like they cannot get further. But I know some people that are acing through it.
Yeah,
like some people just blow through it.
Yeah. So it's going to be a fascinating data point, like you mentioned, because there's people fighting online about $70, and PlayStation is charging $70 for X, and Xbox is only charging $60. I don't know that, like you said, I don't know that Xbox forever will only charge $60, and I guarantee a lot more third-party publishers are going to start bumping that up as we get more into this is a next gen only. This is a PS5, Xbox Series X and S only game. This is $70.
That is a key point too. One reason why you're still seeing so much $60 is because so many projects right now are cross-gen. So it's really taking the ones that are very bold on pricing to say this is cross-gen and I'm going to put $70.
You want to play the updates? $70.
Like if you saw like Ubisoft, they did not do that, right? It was just $60 across the board. They're not comfortable yet going fully, we're going to just make you pay 70 even if it's cross-gen. But I think, like you said, as you get to more and more games that are truly built, they're not going to be on PS4, they're not going to be on Xbox One. I think you see that $70 price tag become more ubiquitous. But, we'll have to wait and see. And I think Microsoft, for example, and some other publishers are in a truly wait and see approach. Like they're watching to see what happens with these games. Because like I said, if Returnal's a success, if Ratchet and Clank comes out and it's a massive hit, which I have every feeling it's going to be gigantic, by the way, for Ratchet and Clank, that, I mean, as mad as people might get, I mean, the numbers say everything. Mm-hmm. So, I always say it. I say it at the end of the day, data does not lie. It just does not lie. Mm-hmm. Flat out, maybe people can misinterpret numbers and twist that into a lie, but the true data, the true numbers, they don't lie.
It really is. Like we're on Twitter a lot. We see a lot of the vocal people, invested in it, upset about it, talking about it. But really, to your point, what people are actually using their money on and spending and buying, that says everything about what these companies are going to do. So they can have people yelling at them on Twitter all day, but if they have numbers that say people are buying this, we're selling millions of copies at this. So I understand your frustrations. We hear you.
You're buying it,
but we're not stopping. So sorry.
But counterpoint though, if some of these games start flopping, you might see that reconsidered. It's entirely possible. So I don't want to say for sure everyone's going to 70 in the next 12 months, but those numbers are going to tell them everything on what they should do.
I think your point about this being the ultimate test is 100% accurate. This Returnal, if Returnal sells well at 70, then really anything can, because it's a weird game, and I love weird games. I absolutely I want more people to take weird risks and put out huge weird games. But it scares publishers to put out weird games that don't do well. So I hope it does well. I'm curious to see if it does well, but I'm wondering if it doesn't, if, like you said, if people are gonna start backpedaling on like, okay, maybe we won't make every game $70. God of War, Horizon, those will definitely be 70, but we'll put out some other ones that are AAA, still big, budget games, but we're not going to throw
Mhm.
the 70 on everything as a blanket just
Mhm.
because it's a PlayStation Studios game.
And the main issue, from what I understand, because I'm here in the U.S., so I don't live, in other international markets. I've heard this is a much bigger deal though if you're outside the U.S. because I've heard some of the regional pricing is like way more intense than what we pay at $70. I've heard the actual jump is bigger than the $10 jump it looks like in the U.S.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so that could be a bigger issue, in other markets. I'll be honest, I think in the US, $10 isn't going to make that much of a difference, but maybe it's going to in some other markets.
I know a lot of people in Canada are talking about it because it is for
Yeah.
them in particular, like they use dollar as well, but that it's a much bigger jump in Canada and they're right above us. So it's,
Yep.
yeah, once you start getting to Europe and these other countries, it'll be interesting to see like how they justify it, how it's received in the US versus other
Mhm.
countries. And we know PlayStation is targeting the West. Like we know
Oh yeah.
PlayStation is targeting the US market more so than many others. So I wonder if that's a factor in it because yeah, if you're paying upwards of like for us it's $10, but in some markets 15-20% more for a game,
Yeah.
that's a lot. That's a big ask for people.
hmm Yep. So we're still early days. We don't know for sure yet, but we'll know in the next 12 months, how these games are selling. We're going to have our answer. But one thing I would say is one thing I would really love to see more of isn't necessarily the $60 game. Actually, I would love to see that $50 game. I think that's the key. I actually think maybe even completely getting rid of the $60 price point. You have those $70, the biggest AAA games, but we see more projects like Miles Morales was and Uncharted Lost Legacy and some of these, not just from Sony, from Microsoft, from everybody, from third parties that have that quote, quote, AAA feel, but aren't the big giant, this game took 5 years to develop type projects and you come in at 50. I think there's a really attractive spot there in the market for like that $50 experience too. So I'd love to see more publishers toy around with that.
Yeah, and I think that's important is justifying that price tag because we have games like Halo Infinite that have this absurd budget. And then you have a
Mhm.
game with like a fraction of the people that cost a fraction to make, and people are going to put the same price tag on it. So I would like
Mhm.
to see people more cognitive of what goes into a game and what is a quote unquote fair price. And a lot of it comes down to publishers afraid if they lower the cost of the game, then people that'll lower the value perception of the game, which I'm
Mhm.
sure
I think that is part of it.
I'm sure that makes it more complicated, but yeah, not all games are the same budget and cost the same. But I mean, I guess we look at going to the movie theater. I can pay $15 to see an indie horror movie, or I can pay $15 to see Marvel's Avengers, and I know Marvel's Avengers had 500 times the budget of that indie horror movie. But
Yep.
I'm gonna get to a quick super chat here from Poochie, who says gameplay, world, story, lol, in that order, lol. Okay, I think that's
Nice.
in terms of like what's most important to them in a game.
Mm.
Somebody else was saying that SMS 34 says that it's about $100 after tax to buy a PS5 game now, which is
Jeez.
going back to Pokemon Stadium. Yikes! Wow, that's
Yeah, I mean that is tough, right? That is brutal. Like I'll tell you right now, if games are like $100 in the US, I would not be telling you that I think that things are going to sell at the same level. I would be
oh,
telling you you're going to see dips. So, the fact that they didn't take some of that into consideration with pricing in other markets, that to me does seem a little crazy.
yeah, it doesn't seem like it's one to one in terms of like what the cost increase is in other markets. So it'll be super interesting once we start getting all the data.
Mhm.
But cool. We're gonna start wrapping it up here. So before I end this stream, one more time, dude, thanks so much for hanging out, chatting numbers with me. It's been an
Mhm.
awesome episode. Let everyone know here where they can catch you, where they can hang out with you, if they have more numbers questions, where they can harass you.
Yeah. So thank you for having me on. This was awesome. I had a blast. Thanks everyone for the good turnout. We were, having some pretty great turnout here, it sounds like. So thank you so much. I had a blast today. Two ways to get a hold of me. The first way, the easiest way, is going to be on Twitter. I'm there way too much. I'm on Twitter all day, every day. So that's going to be the easiest way. It's just Benji-Sales on Twitter. I talk about the video game industry in general. Obviously, my specific focus is going to be sales, business, metrics, data points. But I just talk about gaming news too. So Twitter, Benji-Sales, that's the way to get a hold of me. The second spot's going to be YouTube. I do have a YouTube channel. It's the exact same thing, just Benji-Sales on YouTube. I do one live stream on there per week. It's a really interactive stream. We basically just break down the latest news in the video game industry for about an hour and a half every single week. We chat. So if you have any questions or anything you want to talk about, YouTube, Benji-Sales, that's the other way as well.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, man. And to everyone who's been watching today, really appreciate you. If you're watching live, I'm going to be pulling double duty today. I'm going to be on Xbox Era here in a couple hours. So catch that when that goes live the next week. I forget what day they go live, but yeah. And we'll catch you guys next Saturday. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye.